So Scott was founded in the early 70s in the San Francisco Bay Area. In fact, this is the sign from the very first Scott shop that was in the basement of the founder's house on Cook Street in San Francisco. And this is the founder, Harry Wilson. He started Scott in retirement, but as a lifelong angler and casting geek and member of the Golden Gate Casting Club, he was super involved in the fly fishing scene in the Bay Area. And when Harry started the company, he started out as a specialist in building multi-piece light line fiberglass rods. Fiberglass were the first rods that were roll wrapped around a mandrel, which I'll show you out in the shop, based on, so they actually had plies of material rather than planed and glued together strip. Harry's big light bulb moment was he looked at this material and he said, wow, I think I can build a long light line fly rod out of it. And so you can check this out over here. So he told his friends at the Golden Gate Casting Club that he was gonna make a 9-foot for a 4-line rod. And they said, you're crazy. That's a horrible idea. It's gonna be awful. But he wasn't deterred, and he started out, and you can see the world's first 9-foot 4-line rod right here, prototyped. He didn't even know how to connect graphite, so he used bamboo ferrules. You can see the metal ferrules on them. And eventually he worked through the system until he developed the signature Scott hollow internal graphite ferrule. And once he figured out how to connect these rods, Scott released the world's first 9-foot 4-weight rod. So we've always had an eye toward developing fly fishing tools that allow anglers to either pursue new techniques, new species, or new fisheries. And that's kind of been our MO now for 50 years. We've kept our lane really narrow and just focused on trying to build the best performance handcrafted rods we can. We've never branched out into reels or rain jackets or fly lines or other categories. And it's allowed us to be real specialists in what we do and stay very focused. So this is where we actually make the blanks. Any fishing rod, fly rod, carbon fiber ski pole, golf club, windsurfing mask, any tubular graphite structure is made out of the same basic building block. And that's these sheets of unidirectional carbon fiber. Unidirectional meaning they're all going one way. And it's a carbon fiber combined with an epoxy resin. So it's called pre-impregnated carbon fiber. We all use the same building blocks, but it's how we combine those and present them that makes the real difference. And so that's where our focus really is on the materials technology side, is coming up with innovative ways to combine different moduluses of carbon fiber, to combine different angles of carbon fiber, and to create these multi-laminate structures that make the rod behave the way we want it to, or hope it will, down different sections of its whole length. So once we get them cut and laminated, we prep the mandrels. So here's an example. So then we choose the taper, and we have a whole extensive library of different tapers here. We choose the taper, the place where it's going to go on the rod. This one has both inside off-axis fibers and different material, and also outside. So this particular, just this one section, is made up of 4 different carbon fibers at 3 different angles. So there's a lot of complexity and also a lot of time and effort that goes into making a part like this. The majority of fly rods in the world are just made out of that single sheet you see. So it gets attached to the mandrel. And it gets hung up in the oven. By the end of the day, we'll filled up with about 450 parts. The epoxy that's in here is a thermoset epoxy, so it doesn't catalyze chemically, it catalyzes with heat. And so a little bit of time and temperature will cure the part and make it structurally sound. We tend to do things the sort of the low, slow, and more difficult way. Like a good example would be how we cure. Almost all companies have gone to a rapid cure 15-minute epoxy where you can preheat the oven and then just wheel the rack in, close the door, and 15 minutes later it's done. We do an old school 1 degree a minute from a cold oven, ramp up over 2 hours, soak it for an hour, and then ramp it back down. So we try and do things really gently so that things cure nice and evenly. The epoxy flows.
Because if you do it faster, wouldn't you have more variations in wall?
Exactly. Then all the parts come out here and they get a multi-point QC test. They get stress tested for structural integrity. They get spined for finding the backbone or the overlap of the material. They get visually inspected for surface uniformity and quality. Once we've got our parts that have passed for the day, then it's time to come over and turn them into single pieces of tubing into a combined set that looks like a fly rod blank you would recognize, that goes from tip to butt. And so it's a really elegant system to design, especially light line and smooth bending rods. So we typically use this style of ferrule on our G series and our F fiberglass series. When we go to a faster action, stiffer rod, we prefer what's known as the tip over butt or sleeve ferrule, where one piece, the piece below, is designed to taper match and slide into the piece above. We didn't start using this style of ferrule until about 15 years ago. And the reason was, if you guys remember older fly rods, they'd come down like this and then they would bulk out and there'd be a big thick piece right here. And there was so much mass and stiffness, you'd bend the rod and it would have a flat spot from about here to here. And we just didn't like that. It didn't fit our style. And so another thing that would distinguish us, I think, from other people is how we connect our rods. So we were the first people to, if you look at the wall thickness on that ferrule, it's pretty much as thin as the rest of the piece all the way up. There's, only a few turns of graphite there, but through our reinforcing technology and our layup stuff that we showed you in there, we're able to make this so that it's structurally sound. So we were able to take out probably 80% of the mass and stiffness of a sleeve ferrule and still get that characteristic that makes a nice fast action rod, and we call that the super slim Scott ferrule. And it's since been adopted by, I think, just about everybody. This is really cool. Check that out, Calvin. That's a piece of cork oak bark from Portuguese cork oak orchard.
Wild. I've never seen that before.
And so in Portugal, they have the strictest guidelines in the world for harvesting cork. You have to harvest it every 8 years and rotate through the orchards. So they strip the bark, the tree stays alive, but for doing this for hundreds or thousands of years, they've determined that the ideal growing cycle for the lightest but densest cork is 8 years. Then they lay these big sheets out in the sun to dry, and then they go and start punching out the cork rings that go into making a grip. The difference between buying floor grade cork and super is almost twice as much for a 1/2 inch by 1 1/8 inch ring. But you notice it in not only how long the cork lasts, but how it feels, and also things like the lack of fill in it. If we say to ourselves, our goal is to build the best fly rods we possibly can, it can't just be about blank technology that you can't see and may or not be able to feel. So we look at it like, if you were going to build a great bicycle, you start with the best frame in the world, right? And that would be like the blank. But if you put junk component group on it, it's a junk bike, right? If you put the very best component group on it, it's going to be really nice. And so we approach our componentry and finishing the same way. To some people, these might just be reel holders. To us, they're a lot more than that. They're a way to make someone's angling experience better. This reel seat alone has over 24 individual milling steps. It's self-indexed, so you don't have to fiddle around and figure out where the reel fits. It just locks up for you. It's got speed threads, so you don't have to wind it over and over again. Even little things like this, a whole extra milling step just to put a pulling ridge on the back so you can get your reel off easy. Little touches like engraving the line weight on it and subtly our logo. And then really rad stuff like Type 3 hard coat. So we were the first people to do anything like this on a reel holder. And the reason we went to such lengths and expenses is that, again, back to that bike analogy, this is like putting a great shifter set on your bike or a great set of brakes or whatever other fine component. And so we try to think through the designs of each thing to make it as functional and beautiful as we possibly can. And so that might include really high-tech stuff for saltwater like Type 3 hard coat and some of these other features, or it might include beautiful Cocobolo wood or micarta insert that we use in place of wood, like that, will last a lifetime. Even down to things like machining Delrin washers between the ring and the hood. I've had a set of sectors on my skiff in the Keys since they came out, so 7 years ago. They've never come out of the boat and there's not a speck of rust on the rod.
Awesome. Yeah.
And
You do the same thing with the hook keeper too?
yeah, and so in this particular case, this guide set for the sector rod costs us over $20, but it's not really about the cost, it's about that concept of, if we're asking ourselves, are we doing the best we can, and we put a cheap guide set on to save money, we would be untrue to ourselves and our customers. And so one of the ways we challenge ourselves is to always ask, is this the best we can do? Or can we design a component that's better and have one of our suppliers make it for us? And so it's kept us at the very forefront of component technology. We typically put anywhere from 25 to 40% more thread reps on our rods. Since we don't paint our rods, we get visual interest from thread. So we have a lot more changes in thread color than most companies. And we just find hand wrapping, we can be more precise, more accurate. So when you think about it, the average Scott rod has 48 individual wraps on it, as opposed to about 30. That's a lot of handcrafted work and attention to detail on every single rod. We have 54 employees, and you saw how many admin people we have. So that means 49 of them are rod builders. Everyone, all of our resources go into the rods. So one of the things we do, since we need about 14 other people to wrap, is we let them work remotely from home.
Oh, good.
So they come over and they'll pick up a bundle of these rods, drop off the ones they just completed, and we'll just change out every few days. But once they come back, line up all the guides from the reel seat to the tip top, triple check everything, which is good. Another thing you'll see that we do, I think we're the only company in the industry that uses transparent thread that you can see the guide feet through. And the reason most people don't is it becomes a hassle to straighten every foot out and get them all lined up right. But for us, that's the challenge. We have a sort of a funny saying here where just like we don't sand and paint over our blanks, we can't hide anything, that we actually want you to see the work we do. So we keep it all visible. So when you look at this, you're like, wow, somebody hand wrapped all that. Somebody lined up all the feet. You know, somebody took all the care and attention it took to get that right. So once all that's done and we've put the signature Scott alignment dots on, and in between the second and third, we'll put the logo on. Hey, Laura, could I trouble you to sig this for us? And so this is a cool step because this is almost like, you know, an artist signing their painting or something. You know, with an old school quill nib and ink bottle, we put on the logo, the model, and then every rod gets an individual serial number. And then sort of the final step is come out, get a full inspection, check some structural things, visual stuff, of course. By the end of the day, we'll have a bunch of fresh Scott rods ready to go out to happy people.
That's awesome.